I hope you've seen part one, where I talk about the Shogun author James Clavell. This is part two, and I'll talk about the book and the TV drama series and the real history and the implications for leadership and authority. And there are some fascinating and important insights, in particular insights into the role and function of formal authority, what it is, and how to use it in a responsible way. Now, let me explain why I'm focusing predominantly on the role of authority. Previous videos, I've talked a lot about leadership, and it's important to distinguish leadership from authority. They are not the same thing. Both are important. And a lot of people have authority positions. They are managers and they are bosses, but they don't provide much leadership. And there's a lot of people that gain authority, but they don't manage their authority well, and they end up losing their authority. As I said, leadership and authority are different. Leadership gets people to face reality, address tough problems, and work to improve the human condition, the condition of the community, the organization, or the nation. Authority manages the prevailing order and represents the group, the tribe, so to speak. It's a tribal function. In the story Shogun, there are moments of leadership, but there's also a lot of interesting authority dynamics, and we can learn a lot about authority from the story. Its uses and abuses, the positive and the negative aspects. Now, as you know, if you watched Shogun or read the book, the story is set in the late 1500s, early 1600s, and it's about how a lord, a daimyo, through cunning and strategy and alliances and a dose of good fortune, how he becomes the shogun of all Japan, the ruler of all Japan. Japan lacked unity before the shogun. It was multiple lords fighting for dominance or defending their territory. There was actually more than 200 daimyo, so the unification of the country was a significant accomplishment. The story is an incredible story and based on fact, some elements at least. In history, there was no Lord Toranaga, but there was Tokugawa Ieyasu, a lord of a particular area who did indeed defeat his opponents, build alliances, and unite Japan. He was in many ways an extraordinary character, highly respected in Japan. Well, by many people, not everyone. Like most authority figures of that time, he could be ruthless, shrewd, and vengeful. So we don't want to put him so high on a pedestal. But one reason he is respected is because he did unify the country, albeit through conquest. He did create a national functioning government. And he did seek to exemplify what a good authority figure should be in terms of virtues and values. He was concerned about how future shoguns would lead the country. He actually wrote a manuscript called The Testament of Ieyasu, which provides insight into his philosophy and leadership principles. It's a set of instructions and reflections intended to guide his successors, to help them to be good authority figures. It provides information on governance, what it means to serve the people. For example, it highlights the importance of patience. It stresses the need to learn from both successes and failures and the value of self-reflection and analysis and personal development. It's quite impressive, and it did become a set of principles that were studied by future shoguns. It was one of the reasons the shogunate system persisted for as long as it did. It was a good set of principles on what it means to be an effective and respected authority figure. Ieyasu became the first shogun in a long line of shoguns, and Japan remained relatively united under the Tokugawa shoguns for the next 250 years, which is extraordinary. It all came crashing down, however, after the Americans showed up in Tokyo Bay in 1853 and demanded that the country open its borders to American trade, threatening to bomb them if they refused. Gunboat diplomacy is what it was called. The Americans stirred the hornet's nest. Their presence, their threats, it ignited chaos, and people were confused. Do we remain closed? Do we open up? How do we deal with these foreigners, with the barbarians? What's going to happen? And that's exactly what the story Shogun is about. That's a running theme throughout the drama series. And that's one of the functions or responsibilities of authority, to manage the group's boundaries, cultural and territorial, And managing boundaries is a bit like walking a tightrope. It's risky and it's very easy to make a mistake. Now, in the Shogun story, Lord Toranaga is constantly walking that tightrope. It's a complex system that he is managing with multiple factions that have different and often competing expectations, particularly around boundary management. Now, let me briefly explain this boundary management function of authority. Authority figures are expected to be a boundary manager. This is essentially the task of protecting your space. It includes the somewhat delicate task of determining who you let in and essentially who you kick out, who you include and who you exclude. It's about how you manage that relationship with the other. How do you manage the frontier, that zone between the familiar and the unfamiliar, between the known and the unknown, between us and them? Now, the failure to manage the boundaries well can very easily lead to your undoing, your deauthorization, we might say. Groups authorize and groups deauthorize. If the boundaries are too tight, a group can suffer. If the boundaries are too loose, then identity and a sense of community can weaken. If the boundaries are too porous, too much information can flood the system and overwhelm people. If people are not going to the frontier or beyond the frontier of their competence, the frontier of the challenge, they are not able to innovate or make new discoveries. Now, in Shogun, Lord Toranaga has to play that role of the boundary manager. The outsiders are a threat, whether they are the Dutch, the Portuguese, or the English. These people have suddenly shown up on your shores. What do you do with them? What threat do they pose? What benefits do they potentially offer? The real Lord Tokugawa Ieyasu, when he became the Shogun, he outlawed Christianity in Japan. That's a critical role for him as the boundary manager, determining who should be in, who should be out. In the story, you see Christian priests. They are starting to proselytize in the country. And Christianity actually grew quite rapidly with many adherents. And quite a few samurai and lords became Christians. For a time there in the 1500s, it was actually very popular. But when Japan became united under the new shogun, all the priests were expelled and many Christians were killed. It was a crime to be a Christian. Their creed, their ideas, their power was seen as a threat to the prevailing order. It was seen as a destabilizing force rather than a uniting force or a force for good. Buddhism and Shintoism, these were the dominant religions of Japan. It was actually an integrated belief system. Buddhist and Shinto priests were very powerful, involved in all aspects of governance and the management of community affairs, from birth to death. Everybody paid taxes to their local shrine or temple. I mean, if you've been to Japan and you've seen some of those magnificent temples or extraordinary statues, you can get a sense of the role that Buddhism and Shintoism played in daily life and how pervasive, formidable, and even valued this belief system was. Besides being just a belief system, it was a critical component of the authority structure. It maintained order and continuity. So understandably, these new ideas coming from the West, they were viewed with serious concern. It wasn't just that the Christian ideas or doctrine was a threat, but the fact that the priests were also representatives of their nations, the Dutch, the Portuguese, the English, and what have you. So culturally, politically, and economically, it was threatening and potentially menacing. So Christian missionaries were viewed as a Trojan horse. You let them in, and who knows where that might lead. And that's why the shogun excluded Christians. There wasn't a personal choice. There was considerable pressure on him to do just that as the boundary manager for the country. So up until the 1850s, the boundaries were very tight. Japan was closed to the outside world. Then the American, Commodore Matthew Perry, and his black ships, they landed in Tokyo Bay and demanded that Japan open up, or else. Under the threat of force, Japan had to wrestle again with this boundary question. The boundaries were eventually loosened, many foreigners came in, and certain factions inside the country were extremely angry and demanded that the barbarians be expelled again. Now, it's not just that they hated foreigners because they were different, but they saw what Westerners were doing in neighboring China with the Opium Wars and what have you. But they also saw the technology that the Westerners had, and that was very attractive, even seductive. Now, given the complexity and the difficulty of managing this delicate boundary issue, it led to the collapse of the Tokugawa Shogunate, a system that had brought stability and order to Japan for 250 years. The point is that problems with boundary management can lead to the undoing of an authority figure or an authority structure. It's a very difficult dynamic to manage. It requires tremendous sensitivity and care. Now, the second point I want to make that is also related to boundary management is that authority figures are expected to provide protection to their groups. People expect the authority figure or authority figures that structure that system to protect them and their resources, to protect them defensively and offensively if needed. An expectation is that they will build relationships and alliances with a network of groups in order to ensure protection. So from an authority perspective in the story, Lord Toranaga is expected to protect his people, his clan, and lead them in battle when threatened. He is expected to protect and maintain the traditions in the current order. He is expected to promote and honor a particular set of values pertaining to Bushido, the warrior way. He is expected to protect and reward his network of loyal supporters. Loyalty is a big deal in that feudal cultural context. It's not just loyalty to an individual, it's loyalty to a set of principles. It's a commitment to a particular order, a way of living, a way of being in the world, being in your environment, being with others, being in your role, whether that role is that of a samurai or a merchant, a farmer, or a shokunin, an artisan or a craftsman. The Lord is also expected to reduce the external threats so that people have some sense of security and can get on with their lives. One way of reducing threat and generating stability is to work to unite all the different factions. If that cannot be done through alliances, then that is often pursued through warfare. In the story, Lord Toranaga ultimately unites Japan through alliances and conquest and becomes shogun. The real shogun, Tokugawa Ieyasu, he did just that. He created a network of alliances and also fought and won the most famous and perhaps most important battle in Japanese history, the Battle of Sekigahara. More than 160,000 troops participated in that battle. Extraordinary to say the least. Now, after that critical win, Japan became a united country, and for the next 250 years, the nation under the shoguns, the Tokugawa family, was relatively stable. But all that changed, as I said, in the 1850s and 1860s after the Americans showed up, and the rule by shoguns came to an end. And one reason the shogunate system came to an end was because many people, many factions felt that the shogun was not protecting them from the foreign menace. Sono joi, that was the rallying call of the opposition that led to the end of the shogunate system. Sono joi, in Japanese it means revere the emperor and expel the barbarian, the foreigner. This leads to my third point about the role of authority. As an authority figure, you are expected to play a symbolic role for the group. You must represent their values, their ideals, and their traditions. You need to understand the symbolic aspects of authorization and the expectations associated with that, and manage the symbolic role appropriately. This is a huge and important responsibility, and a lot of people don't think about this, the symbolism of authority. An important question to ask as an authority figure is, what are the values I must represent? What kind of a symbol do I need to be? How do I need to manifest the symbolic aspects of authority? For example, it's natural, or at least common, for a group to want their authority figures to be a symbol of strength, a symbol of goodness, and to represent the best cultural traits and virtues. But you can also be used by the group or certain factions in the group to be a symbol of the shadow of the group, the dark forces, we might say. You are supposed to amplify your group's virtues while diminishing the virtues of other groups, a bit like a gang. We are the good guys and the others are the bad guys. So you play the role of a fighter, a champion, or a bully. Now, a lord or a shogun, he has to be a bit of all those things. He is expected to be the embodiment of the ideal, the cultural ideal. He is expected to be a visible symbol of strength and hope, and he is expected to be a great warrior, a great samurai. He has to embody the principles of Bushido, the way of the samurai. He has to be someone that people can look to. That is why in the story, Lord Toranaga is always sitting with his magnificent robes and his helmet and samurai swords, sitting there on a chair on a hill overseeing the battle, for example. His banner and his flags are behind him. That's for his men to know that he is there, and that's what they are fighting for. It's a symbolic manifestation of the power and the unity and the integrity of the group. It's the nobility of their mission, the nobility of the fight. It gives purpose and meaning for fighting, and purpose and meaning for dying. Now, there's a wonderful movie called Kagemusha by the famous director Akira Kurosawa. If you don't know, Kurosawa was probably the greatest filmmaker Japan has produced. Anyway, he made Kagemusha. Kagemusha, it means the shadow warrior. It came out in 1980, an outstanding movie. The story explores the fragility and the illusion of formal authority, that mysterious dynamic between the group and the authority figure. The great lord dies, and his advisors don't want the people to know that, nor do they want their enemies to know. They worry that things might fall apart, or their enemies might take advantage of this moment of vulnerability. So they look everywhere for someone who resembles the Lord, and they eventually find a common thief, a peasant. They choose him to act, to pretend that he is the great Lord. They dress him up in the robes of authority so that he looks like the Lord. Everyone thinks he is the Lord. Now, they keep this secret for 3 years in order to maintain stability and prevent rival clans from attacking them. The thief's role as a shadow warrior, shadow lord Kagemusha, is to act as the Lord. This is crucial to preserving the illusion of the Lord's presence, the symbol of authority, and ensuring the morale of the troops is maintained and that their allies remain loyal. Because everyone respects the great Lord. If he is there, the sun shines. If he is not, the sky darkens, so to speak. Now, the film Kagemusha is really exploring the function and the role of authority as a construct, a symbolic function, an aspect of group dynamics, relying heavily on symbolic value and appearances and collective belief. Now, it's interesting because the petty thief who acts in the role of the Lord, he begins to internalize the psychology and the behavior of the Lord, kind of like method acting. He becomes the Lord. Now, at Harvard in our teaching, we talk about the importance of separating or distinguishing the self and the role. Don't believe you are really that figure that people are all looking to or admiring or applauding. So keep the self and the role separate. Don't collapse the two. It can lead to all sorts of trouble. Well, the thief, he fails to do that, and he gradually dedicates himself fully to the role, losing his individuality, his sense of self for the sake of the clan. He believes he is the Lord and that the Lord's spirit has entered him, and he sacrifices himself for the group, for the clan. And he rushes into battle heroically, and he is killed, dying sacrificially and honorably as any great lord should. Now, coming back to Shogun and the ultimate demise of the shogunate system after 250 years, the deauthorization of the shogun system. Besides not protecting Japan from foreigners, another reason the shogunate fell because many people felt that the shogun as a person, as a position, as a system of governance, from a symbolic point of view, was not what it should be. It was no longer living up to the expectation, the cultural ideal. It was too much of a bureaucracy. It was complacent. It was arrogant. It took too much for granted. And that's common in any system that's been functioning for a long time. It's easy to stagnate. Now, there were two very powerful clans or factions that came together and overthrew the shogun and restored the emperor as the head of government. I mean, the emperor was always there, but he was off to the sidelines, out of sight, so to speak. These two clans, the Satsuma clan and the Choshu clan, they were disappointed with the shogun. They felt excluded from the problem-solving and decision-making work of governance. And they also felt that the shogun was not a good role model. They argued that the only person that could be the true authority figure for the nation was the emperor. The emperor was the son of heaven, figuratively and literally. The essence or the blood or the soul of the great sun goddess, Amaterasu, it flowed in him. She's like the creator god, the goddess of Japan. The emperor embodied continuity and divinity. He was a direct descendant of Amaterasu. So from a symbolic point of view, only the emperor could unite the country and be someone everyone could look to for guidance, reassurance, and identity. That's why they overthrew the Shogun and installed the emperor as the head of state. To them, that would ensure the stability of Japan and make Japan great again. Now, the last point I want to make about authority is this. Manage your authority in a way that you don't make it all about authority. Don't promote excessive dependence on authority, on you. Create a system of interdependence. Dependence is when everyone is looking to you or waits for you, the authority, to tell them what to do. In the same way that chimpanzees are always looking to the dominant alpha to lead the way for approval or whatever. Interdependence is shared responsibility. When there is interdependence, there is a lot of initiative in the system. When you have authority, you are in a position to use your authority to exercise some degree of leadership and get people to do the adaptive work of problem solving, development, change, and innovation. It's a wonderful platform to spotlight issues. So don't hog the spotlight and make it all about you. Use your authority to put the spotlight on that critical body of work that needs to be addressed in order to advance. You can frame the challenge, but it is also important to give aspects of these unresolved concerns and problematic issues back to the different groups and factions that are a part of the problem. By giving it to them, you can enrich the quality of the diagnosis and understanding of the challenge and understanding and appreciation of the terrain that needs to be traversed to move from a situation of irresolution to resolution. When there is excessive dependence on the authority figure, the group's critical thinking and creative capacities, that sense of responsibility, it is reduced or remains latent. It's not harnessed. People become complacent or apathetic or indifferent or dispirited. Also, if there is excessive dependence, when the authority figure dies or moves on, is no longer there, things can easily fall apart. At the extreme, chaos can ensue. People might compete for dominance, to be the top dog, and ugly political or even real battles can occur. This is a theme in Shogun. When a lord dies, the politics gets ugly as people fight for the role of alpha. It unleashes an unhealthy, competitive, and rancorous dynamic. Each faction wants someone from their faction to be the dominant authority figure, and they battle it out. When people get bogged down in counterproductive political battles and waste valuable resources, the consequences, as we can all appreciate, it can be disastrous. It can lead to the collapse of this system. It can lead to bitterness between groups, a rivalry that gets played out for generations. This dynamic happens when the dominant authority figure, the authority structure, fails to do the leadership work of building bridges between groups and developing a system, a structure, a process for distributing power and responsibility and passing on authority so that there is minimal disruption and a smooth transition. Now, we see this all the time. Authority figures holding on to their authority way too long, promoting or perpetuating dependence. They don't want to let it go. Even if they are loved and admired and doing a pretty good job, the danger is that they generate an unhealthy reliance on them to keep the system functioning, to provide meaning for the group, to solve their problems, and to show the way forward, to be that symbol of hope. It can be very seductive. That kind of unhealthy dependence can very easily lead to ugly dependence. Ugly dependence is when the group projects onto their authority figure a special power, even a divine power, a sacred power, with the implication being that they are the chosen one and no one else can fulfill that role or do what they do. They have a certain charisma. And that's what charisma means. It's a Greek term meaning gift of the gods, divine power. A person doesn't really have charisma. It's not like a human trait or quality. It is more of an attribution. It's bestowed by the group. So, of course, some authority figures love this and they perpetuate this dynamic. They revel in the admiration and they promote dependence. They really believe, or they act as if they are special and unique. So they exploit that sentiment. It feeds their narcissism or ambition or whatever. And of course, you also have people who gain authority, but they don't do anything productive or meaningful with it. They just enjoy the status, or they focus too much on the maintenance of the status quo. They take up space. They don't take any risks. The risks needed to tackle complex problems, to challenge people to change, to create and to innovate, or to try something new or different. The point here is that many authority figures get preoccupied with gaining and maintaining authority and enjoying the benefits that authority provides, but they neglect the adaptive work, the change work, the leadership work. And they neglect the work of building the leadership capacity and problem-solving capacity of the larger system. They fail to encourage, promote, and protect other people doing important leadership work. Why? Because they want to make it all about them. Okay, let's bring this to a close. I've talked about authority and its purpose, using the Shogun story as a way to illustrate some of the tasks of authority and the expectations people have of authority. And this pertains to why groups authorize someone to play the role of an authority figure, and how and why they deauthorize. The group, the people, they grant you authority, and they expect in return you provide a set of services that allow for protection, stability, and meaning. Depending on the context, the nature of the challenge, some of those tasks will be more important than others. You're also expected to play a symbolic role that everyone can look to. And as a symbol, you must embody, manifest, promote, champion the group identity, their values, their traditions. They must see something in you that allows for continuity between the past, the present, and the future. And you need to manage the boundaries. For example, who do you include and who do you exclude in the work of problem-solving, decision-making, and change, and what have you. You must manage the relationship between groups, and you need to understand the nature of authorization and manage that authorization process. Manage the expectations, we might say. Now, I need to stress this point one more time. Just because you are relatively good at using authority, in other words, you do the things authority figures are supposed to do and you do it well, that doesn't mean you are providing leadership. You might be planning or implementing a program or coordinating with other people or groups. Well, good for you. That's what authority figures do. That's what managers do. That's what you are expected to do. Leadership is about helping people do the adaptive work of modifying their values and their thinking and their priorities. It's about getting people to face difficult realities and wrestle with tough problems. It's about getting people to the frontier of the challenge, the frontier of their competence, in order to experiment, explore, create, and innovate. And sometimes it's about healing wounds, building bridges, and engaging multiple groups in generating something new, of substance, of shared value. Now, in the Shogun story, a lot of the authority dynamics are about maintaining order, stability, and control. It's about boundary management, symbolism, and enforcing the cultural norms. All these things are very important. In the story, you do see the authority figures networking and building alliances, not necessarily to do the work of leadership, but mostly for political reasons, to consolidate or solidify their positions. Now, I understand that that's an aspect of social life, political life. It's important to think and act politically when the stakes are high. But it's very easy to get trapped in politics or the work of authority and fail to do the leadership work. In fact, it's very difficult to be a good authority figure, a political figure, and also to do the work of leadership. Of course, it can be done, but it's not easy. That's the point. That's why you must support the leadership contributions of others in the system. You should encourage them, partner with them, even protect them. Now, it's not the subject of this video, but it's important to know that you don't have to be the dominant authority figure to exercise leadership. You can exercise leadership in varying degrees in varying ways without formal positional authority. It takes courage, it takes creativity, it takes strategic thinking, it takes partners, but it can be done. Actually, in leadership work and authority work, it helps to have a diverse network of partners to support you. I say diverse because you need different, even competing perspectives to help you figure out what actions you should take. I mean, that's wonderfully illustrated in the Shogun story, how Lord Toranaga partners with and listens to and protects the Englishman John Blackthorne. He values that perspective because it is so different. He values the words of Lady Mariko because she is wise, she understands the politics of what Toranaga is dealing with, and she appreciates what's at stake. She's a trustworthy confidant. Now, the final point is this. Given the demands and the difficulties of both leadership and authority, it is important to do a lot of personal work on the self. You have to develop your critical thinking capabilities so that you can expand your perspective, think with clarity, manage yourself, your mental and physical well-being, because the moment you are granted authority, it can be a tremendous burden, and it's very easy to falter under that burden and not think or act with clarity. And that's what I want to talk about in the next video, the personal work of leadership and authority in the context of the training of a samurai. So I think you'll find that very interesting. Okay, I think that's enough for today. If you haven't already, subscribe to the channel. Hit the proverbial subscribe button below. Also, add your comments in the comment section down there. Join the conversation. What do you think about Shogun? What do you think about leadership and authority? What's your perspective? What's your take? What insights do you have? What questions does all this generate for you? So in the comment section, we can interact and have a conversation to the degree that we can in that space. Why not? Give it a try. Okay, talk to you in the next video again. Look forward to seeing you. Take care.